Welcome to Christopher George, the solution series. I'm the man with a plan. Not left, not right, not red or blue. Oh, oh, this is about what's right. Oh, oh, and what we do, Harlot integrity driven. Standing for this land, real leadership for all America. No parties, no games, no smoke, no spin. Real talk, real vision. Let's begin.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Christopher George, the Solution Series. Today's episode is Black Power plus Black Unity, the Stabilizing Force. This is part 2 of the earlier conversation I had. In the first episode, I laid out the vision, the why, the context, and the framework for how Black leadership working with institutions across this country can help stabilize and strengthen America through coordinated action. Today I move on from the vision to actual execution as promised. In this episode is where I walk through the initiative step by step, who fits where, what responsibilities exist, and how the pieces of this structure can begin to align in the real world. No speeches, no slogans, just the plan. So if you're just joining us, I recommend going back and listening to part 1 because that sets the stage for everything we're about to cover. But if you're ready to work and get into the work, let's begin. In the earlier version, I put the metrics in the plan. I'm going to attach the metrics again to this plan. And also what I'm going to do at the end of this is I'm creating a document of the step-by-steps, PDF document of those step-by-steps for anybody who's interested. And I'll provide a link for that. You're going to have to go to my podcast homepage to get that link with all my other documents that I've written. Each one of my initiatives I've written a complete paper on. So they're all for public view. Go to my pages. You can read about anything I'm talking about. I talk a little bit about each of the initiatives here. But if you really want to go into depth of what I'm talking about, each one of those papers explains those. Like as usual, before we get into today's discussion, I want to take a minute to set expectations. If you heard this before, like I said, this is a good time to grab a cup of coffee. If you have it, this opening matters because it explains how I approach leadership solutions in this platform. Here's the standard. Leadership isn't just about talking. Not anymore. I mean, it was great a while back when we needed to, fit in. Leadership isn't just pointing out what's wrong. Leadership comes prepared with a plan and the courage to talk about it openly. The plan I bring today isn't rigid. It's strong enough to move us forward and flexible enough to improve through focused conversation. Because the best plan will always be the one shaped by the most thoughtful input. And that's the expectation here. This space is for discussion, but discussion with purpose. If you engage, I ask you to be direct, be respectful, focus your energy on the plan. If you see a flaw, bring a fix. If you have a what if, bring a solution with it. Noise doesn't move us forward. Thoughtful contribution does. This podcast is about America, but it's not limited to America. We live in a connected world. Many of the solutions discussed here can be applied anywhere people are working to build stability, dignity and opportunity. My goal is to help America lead again, not by force, but by example, so others can adapt what works for their own communities through our leadership. And let me be clear about something I believe deeply. I believe there's always a nugget of truth and experience and insight. In every person, there's something valuable, something learned, something earned, something seen from a perspective no one else has. That's why I welcome everyone to the table, because without you, there's no us. Without the shared experience, there's no progress. And I believe that. But with that welcome comes responsibility. The insights and experiences that I'm talking about are meant to build us, not tear us down. To strengthen ideas, not sabotage them. To move us closer to solutions, not deeper into division. Our tools today that we have are more powerful than they've ever been in our history. Our ability to build is growing exponentially every day, but so is our ability to destroy. That means we have a responsibility to do better, to think deeper, to lead smarter, and to work towards peace that works towards everyone, not just a few. This podcast is about evolution. Evolution as a country, evolution as a people, evolution as a world. Because that's the expectation. That's the standard. Now let's get to work. Before we begin walking through these initiatives, I want to take a moment to thank everyone who's taken the time to listen. Because conversations like this have to start somewhere. And I want to speak directly for a moment to my fellow veterans. Many of you will understand exactly where I'm coming from. We serve this country with no guarantees, no promise of recognition, no expectation of reward. We serve because it was the right thing to do. You stand shoulder to shoulder with people from every race, every background, every belief system imaginable. And in that moment, none of those differences matter because you're all serving something bigger than yourselves. That's what America's supposed to look like. Then many of us come home and we look around. Sometimes what we see doesn't reflect the integrity we live by. We see division where there should be unity. We see noise where there should be leadership. We see systems driven almost entirely by money, influence, and attention. And that creates a deep frustration for many veterans because we know what discipline looks like. We know what trust looks like. We know what honor looks like. We've lived it. And even knowing everything we know now, most of us would still raise our hands and serve again because this is our country. Not perfect. It never has been. We don't disillusion ourselves with that because we know our capabilities. But our country. And that's why I'm doing this. Because some of you've asked that question. Why are you doing this? Now here's something else we need to say out aloud. Not everyone in this country dreams the same dream. Some people dream of wealth, of being rich, famous, wearing the finest clothes, living the biggest life possible. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you got to acknowledge, people, that there's some people don't want that. Some people's dream of something simpler, a stable home, a safe neighborhood, food on the table, a dignified life. Those dreams should be able to coexist in the same nation. Why not? And both should lead to happiness. Because the true measure of a great nation, and I might be repeating what somebody said, but I honestly believe this, has never been how it treats the powerful. The true measure of a great nation is how it treats the people with the least. Some of you lost that. They got you believing that it's wrong to take care of the people with the least. Right now, we have systems that provide for the poor, but we have not built systems that allow them to live with dignity. If you really look at our systems, and there's a difference. Provisions keep people alive. Dignity help people live. What I'm trying to do here is imagine a system where both can exist, where success can still be pursued, but dignity is never sacrificed, where innovation and wealth creation continue, but the foundation of the country remains stable for everyone. This is not about tearing down anything. I keep saying that because people feel that to have something new, you got to tear something down. This is about evolving, elevating and evolving, moving to the next level of what this country should be. Initially, I said can be, should be. And this is where I want to speak directly to the institutions and organizations that may hear this, because what I'm about to present as something unusual. I know it. People, I've already got a couple of, man, what the hell are you doing, Chris? Who do you think you are? Across America, organizations are built to operate within their own lanes. Policing organizations focus on policing. Engineering groups focus on engineering. Universities focus on education. Advocacy groups focus on policy. That's how our systems evolved. But what rarely happens is alignment across those sectors towards a shared national objective. Rarely. Not because people don't care, but because most institutions were never designed to coordinate that way. And that's where my background as a soldier, a planner, shaped how I look at problems. In the military, you're trained to step back and look at the entire battlefield. You look at the terrain. You look at the assets. You look at the capabilities already present. Then you ask a different question. How do we align what already exists so the mission succeeds? That's what this framework attempts to do. It doesn't create new institutions. It doesn't replace existing ones. It simply asks, What happens if the capabilities we already have align? Because the capabilities are already here. The intelligence is already here. The institutions are already here. What we've lacked is alignment. And that's what these initiatives represent. One attempt to bring integrity, structure, and coordination back into how we solve problems as a nation. Not doom and gloom, opportunity. Opportunity to elevate, opportunity to evolve, opportunity to build something stronger than what we inherited. Opportunity to build something stronger than what we inherited also. But make no mistake about something. Frameworks like this do not move forward in a vacuum. Plans don't execute themselves. What I've tried to do here is something simple in concept but powerful in implication. I've tried to light the runway, basically. Look at it this way. I've tried to light the runway. Right now, if we're honest, much of our national conversation feels like planes circling in the dark, pilots searching for direction, institutions operating independently, different airlines, different airports, capabilities that exist but not our line. And then you think about this, the runway we've been using for decades was built for a different era, different technology, different challenges, different expectations. And while it carried us along the way, the world has evolved. The aircraft are more advanced, the systems are more complex, the stakes are higher. So sometimes progress doesn't mean abandoning the airport. It means building a better runway. It means one with stronger foundations, clearer direction, and lights bright enough that every pilot knows exactly where to land. That's what this framework attempts to do. These initiatives are runway lights, stretched down both sides, illuminating the path forward. But runway lights don't fly the planes. They simply make the path visible. It still takes pilots willing to fly. It still takes engineers willing to improve the craft. It takes ground crews coordinating operations. It takes the people who keep their entire system running. That's how real progress is supposed to work. Different talents, different roles, all aligned towards a safe landing and a powerful takeoff. What I've done here is try to lay out the runway. Guys, the lights are on. The direction is clear. But bringing this aircraft fully into the air will require people and institutions far larger than me, not just leaders in title. And let me be clear about this, not just leaders in title, leaders in character. Individuals and organizations who understand the difference between attention and responsibility, between influence and integrity. Because what this moment requires is not ego, not noise, and not another competition for credit. It requires integrity. Leaders who bring solutions to the tables instead of slogans. Organizations willing to align their strengths instead of protecting their lanes. Professionals who understand that real power is not measured by how loudly you speak, but what you build and what benefits from it. And it requires leaders willing to demonstrate what it actually looks like to lead in power. And when I say lead in power, I mean something very simple. Leaders who are not afraid of being seen, leaders who are not afraid of scrutiny. Because when you know what you're doing, when you know you're doing the right thing, when your focus is forward, your intentions are honest, and your work is meant to build something better, there's nothing to hide. In fact, visibility becomes strength because integrity holds up under light. Too much of what we see today chases attention, likes, views, noise. But leadership isn't performance. Leadership is responsibility. It's responsibility means doing the work whether the cameras are on or off and being willing to stand by it when they are. That is the kind of leadership this effort calls for. Leadership that puts mission before recognition. Leadership that understands the responsibility that comes with influence. And leadership willing to show through action what it means to use power with integrity. Because if there's one thing many of us who serve this country have seen since returning home, it is this. Integrity has become the missing ingredient in too many of our systems. Too much noise, too much performance, too much focus on money without equal focus on purpose. Now, let me be clear. There's nothing wrong with prosperity. People will pursue wealth in their own way, and that has always been part of the American story. But prosperity should never replace principle. And when integrity leads to effort, prosperity tends to follow anyway. Because when people align their talents, their institutions, and their resources towards building something meaningful, opportunity expands for everyone involved, not just a few. That is the kind of leadership this moment requires right now. Not leaders who want spotlight. Leaders willing to help build the runway so the whole country can take off. That is where this, I call it, national stability initiative begins. Not as a command structure, and this is the organization that we're going to have to create to help manage these initiatives and make sure that we meet the milestones and goals that we need to do. But as a runway, a place where capability can align, coordination can happen, and the future can take off. So with that said, let's walk through these initiatives. This might be tedious for some of you, but like I said, this has to be said and it has to be done so people can understand that there is a plan. The first initiative is called the Unified National Police Training Center, the UNPTC. I did a podcast on this and I also wrote a paper on it, so they're viewable if you want to look at them. The problem, for Black Americans, policing has never lived in textbooks or court opinions. It has lived in funerals, vigils, and memories that never fade. The law promises equal protection, but history has too often delivered unequal encounters. Where you live has often determined not just how you are treated, but whether interaction ends safely at all. Generations have grown up not learning about policing from civic classes, but from names, from stories, from warnings passed down at kitchen tables. Keep your hands visible. Don't move too fast. Make it home before it gets dark. This is why I put the policing issue up first. Because when a system holds the power to take life, inconsistency is not a policy flaw. It is a human cost. Before trust can be asked for, professionalism must be guaranteed. Two officers can swear the same oath and be trained completely different. One de-escalates, one escalates. That's our reality. And the outcomes are always predictable. Unnecessary force, community distrust, civil lawsuits paid by taxpayers, officers placed in situations they were never properly trained to handle. And guys, don't get me wrong, I'm not police bashing here at all. This is the truth. All right. We spent decades protesting outcomes instead of trying to shape the training that produces the outcomes. If training creates behavior and behavior creates history, then refusing to shape training guarantees we repeat history. That makes sense to me. The organizational purpose for this is for America. Create a national professional baseline for policing so citizens' safety and an officer's decision making do not depend on a zip code. That's simple. This is not. Not trying to federalize the police for you federalists out there, you paranoids out there. I'm trying to standardize professionalism. The same way pilots, doctors, and soldiers operate under national doctrine while working locally. America benefits through fewer use of force incidents, reduced municipal legal payouts, safer officers, restored public legitimacy in law enforcement. I wrote a paper on this and it gets a lot more in depth than this. And I wish, if you're really interested in this, go ahead and read it. The organizations, I believe that should be involved that already sit closest to this problem and understand different parts of the solution that I put together are the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, and NOBLE. I look to them for leadership, ethics, command decision-making, internal cultural reform. The National Black Police Association, the NBPA, officer experiences, the field realities, practical training gaps, the Howard University School of Law, where it comes to constitutional guardrails, civil rights standards, liability frameworks, and then the historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs, criminal justice departments, in the helping in the curriculum design, research validation, and how do we develop an instructor pipeline? And then here are the steps to make this real. Step one, we establish a standard commission. The leading organization of this would be the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. They form the National Police Standards Working Group and chairs a meeting. The historically Black colleges and universities and criminal justice program, they help provide the training doctrine experts and curriculum and specialists. The Howard University School of Law, they help with the Constitutional Compliance Review. The National Bar Association, they help with the civil liability and use of force legal clarity. The National Alliance of Mental Illness, Black Chapter Partnerships, they help with crisis response to behavioral standards and helping create those. And then the community representative, faith and civic organizations, they help us through getting this out to the public on what we're trying to do and generating that publicity for it. And at the end of step one, what we have is the UNPTC doctrinal framework version 1.0. Step two, we build a national training doctrine. The leader of this will be the historically black colleges. They will lead this effort. And what they do is they convert doctrine into teachable modules. I need Howard Law to help out. The legal validation of these scenarios, the National Bar Association, help creating the liability risk testing. The NBPA, National Black Police Association, the Black Police Association affiliates, street level practically testing, the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement, NOBLE, final approval and publication. The output of step two, National Professional Policing Doctrine, plus an instructor guide will build the momentum. Step three, pilot departments. Leading this effort should be NOBLE, the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. They recruit 3 to 5 volunteer departments to test this out. The local Black police associations help implement training internally to test, what we're trying to do is does it make sense? The HBCUs, they help collect performance matrix. The National Bar Association, we track legal outcomes, complaints and lawsuits, community advisory panels, public perception reporting, the output, public pilot performance reporting on this new way of doing things. Step four, federal incentive legislation. Leader of this is the Congressional Black Caucus. Policy staff, followed by the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, present pilot results to lawmakers. The National Bar Association drafts a legal framework and language. Howard Public Policy School writes implementation structure. The Congressional Black Caucus members, they sponsor incentive legislation. Black Mayors Association endorse adoption incentives. National Urban League, economic impact justification. The output of step four, incentive-based national adoption bill, non-federalized. Step five, a national certification program. The lead authority here is now going to be the UNPTC certification board. I imagine this board hosted by the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, NOBLE, combined with the Historically Black Colleges and Universities Consortium. NOBLE runs a certification board operations. Historically Black College conducts certification training audits. The National Bar Association certifies legal compliance. Black Police Associations, supervisory reinforcement verification. The Urban League, community engagement verification. The National Association for Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, civil rights compliance audit review. Guys, at the end of that step, we should have certifications required by them, doctrine adapted, training completion, supervisor reinforcement, data reporting compliance, and the output would be a public certified department's registry. Step six, the national adoption and expansion. And this will be led by the National Urban League and Black Mayors Association. Community rollout partnerships, Urban League, the Black Mayors Association, city adoption agreements, HBCUs, instructor trainings for new regions, NOBLE, new department onboarding, NAACP, public transparency and assurance, the Black Chamber of Commerce, vendor and local training contracts. And then step seven, because part of my system and something that we don't have right now is a national readiness reporting system, and I have the historically black colleges leading this, leading a data science consortium. They build a readiness reporting dashboard, and I got some real, my paper goes real in deep to this. So if you really, this is something really new, I think, for the police department. So go into that if you get a chance. NOBLE required department reporting, Black Tech Organ, the BDPA, system security and maintenance, NAACP Public Transparency and Oversight, and the National Bar Association Privacy Compliance Review. We want to be audited at everything we do. And the output for this would be a National Policing Readiness Visibility System. And then step 8, a continuous career education system for the police. Who leads this effort? The HBCUs. See, we're developing stuff not for black people, but for the whole This is better in the whole police system. Promotion level courses, mandatory return to school policies, because in my policy, I require cops to go back to the schoolhouse to get trained, similar to the way we do in the military. The BPA, they work on the process for candidate nominations for who gets picked up. In the Urban League, they work on leadership, ethics, coursework, and integration. And then step 9, funding protection structure. I got the Black Economic Alliance and the National Urban League leading this. The BEA develops a funding structure design. The Urban League talks about grant administration. The Congressional Black Caucus, statutory funding protection for policing now. What I'm talking about now is get the statutory funding for policing. And then National Association, NAACP, for accountability oversight. Any system I build is going to have oversight. Guaranteed. And finally, step 10, public transparency platform. Leading this in this NAACP public trust portal, a public dashboard management that shows, the public what this dashboard looks like, how we get metrics on cops and everything else. Historically, black HBCU data teams, data publishing, Noble, department reporting, enforcement. And what I'm talking about here, guys, the standards for each one of these: data publishing standards, department republic enforcement standards, and then the Urban League public education campaigns, what those look like. And the output, real-time public legitimacy system. And the end state of this whole thing would be, within one generation, we could change police professionalism becomes a nationally consistent. Departments gain legitimacy through certification. Communities see measurable accountability. Officers operate under clear expectations nationwide. The badge stops representing uncertainty and starts representing reliability. Structural trust replaces negotiated trust. I'm ready to talk to those agencies that I just talked to right now and get this started. Part 2. Initiative 2, moving on, guys, is the voting core. Now, I don't have to tell you why this is part 2. I kind of weighed this one between part 1 because right now, voting right now is really in threat. And what I don't understand is how we can say something is so valuable to us and we don't put the systems in place to protect it. And that's what this attempts to do, this initiative, protect voting. Right now in America, we treat voting like an event. But democracy is not an event. It's an infrastructure. For generations, the vote has been suppressed, manipulated, distrusted, administratively fragmented, dependent on temporary volunteers. The result, every election becomes a stress test instead of a routine function. Lines form, machines fail, rules change by state, trust collapses before results arrive. A right purchased in blood should not rely on last-minute organizations to survive. A right purchased in blood should not rely on last-minute organization to survive. The nation protects airports permanently. The nation protects courts permanently. The nation protects borders permanently. Well, according to most people, we don't. But the mechanism that decides leadership, the vote, operates episodically. This creates instability, regardless of political party. The purpose is to create a permanent, disciplined civic service institution dedicated to protecting, standardizing, auditing, and strengthening the American voting system. Not turnout operations, not party politics, infrastructure protection. Americans benefit through consistent national election standards, prevention of fraud and accusations of fraud, increased participation through trust, faster conflict resolution, restored democratic legitimacy. This transforms voting from a fragile ritual into a resilient system. The organizations I believe should be involved in this: Each cover a different operational layer of democracy. Civil rights and legal protection. I believe the National Association for Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, constitutional protection and litigation readiness. The Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under law. They're what they know in election protection enforcement. For civic training and workforce structure, I believe the National Urban League could help in this. They're good with large scale workforce training and certification pipelines. AmeriCorps, a national service structure through integration. And then the veteran service organizations, for discipline recruitment pool, for community engagement and participation, the National Coalition of Black Civic Participation, civic education networks, Black Voters Matters, community trust channels, and faith-based coalitions to determine turnability, stability, and local coordination, academic and technical infrastructure, the Howard University of Law, and then historic HBCUs, public policy programs, government research and analytics, and then cybersecurity programs at historically black colleges, for machine integrity and oversight. And then government and operational partners, the U.S. Election Assistance Commission, technical standards integration, U.S. Postal Services, and then the state secretaries of state execution and partnership. And I added these on there because, we can't get these done without these organizations involved. To think that, hey, we black, we will get this fixed. I'm not. That we ain't there yet. And step one in this is called establishing the voting corps authority. Purpose, a permanent governance structure. And who does what? The NAACP drafts a federal charter language defining, the independent protections of the voting corps. Howard Law designs constitutional compliance framework. A lawyers committee builds oversight, accountability, and procedures. The National Urban League designs administrative staffing model. AmeriCorps can integrate service classification structure. But the output from step one would be a national voting corps headquarters with oversight board and a regional commands. Step two, recruit and train civic agents. The purpose, build disciplined, nonpartisan civic force. Who does what? The VSO, veteran service organizations, they recruit disciplined candidates I'm looking at veterans primarily for the voting corps to start off. The National Urban League, they manage applications and certification pipeline. Howard Law teaches voting and law and constitutional rights. Historically, HBCUs, cybersecurity programs teach machine and auditing and cyber integrity. Faith-based coalitions recruit community participants. AmeriCorps can administer service enrollment and stipends. The output, certified voting corps civic agents trained in doctrine of the nation, which is the voting corps doctrine. Step three, standardized voting systems. The purpose is to remove state fragmentation. Who does what? Howard Law defines legal baseline standards. HBCU design national operating framework. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, LDF, reviews rights compliance safeguards. The EAC integrates standards into national technical guidelines. And the Secretaries of State help implement within the state systems. Output, a national voting operational baseline compatible with state control. Step four, and if you're still with me, I appreciate you staying here. Continuous random auditing, the CRA. The purpose, prevent problems before elections. Who does what? The CRA is a program I put into the voting corps to ensure that at all times the vote is always up to par. I got the HBCU cybersecurity programs, performing system integrity, developing the programs for system integrity. And see, guys, I'm saying the black people are creating these systems for a national system for everybody to fall under. I'm not creating a system for black people. All right. I'm calling out the black agencies that I feel in this black power moment can execute this to help the country get back on stabilization and get these programs involved, because each one of these initiatives help America become better. A voting corps helps America become better. All right. I got lawyers committee monitoring compliance, developing thing for monitoring compliance, the plans for the policy for monitoring compliance violations. The NAACP developing policy that investigates right violations. State election officers help us develop a policy for coordinate access to sites and stuff like that. The output annual full coverage audit cycle before elections. A system that does an annual full coverage audit cycle before elections. I got it based on a 10-month life cycle, meaning that after 10 months, read the paper. Step 5, secure mail-in and ballot handling. Purpose to protect high-risk voting channel. Who does what? I got voting core agents develop a process, the policy for monitoring drop box and chain of custody. The USPS manages a policy for manages physical ballot transport. We already have it. We just got to look at it again, make sure it makes sense for today's environment. HBCUs develop a policy for monitoring, tracking, and verification system, whatever that looks like. And then I got the NAACP developing policy that oversees voter access and protections. At the output, we have a policy verified and monitored that deals with verified and monitored national balloting handling system. A whole policy for that. And then step 6, we look at and part of my plan calls for weekend voting implementation, making a holiday out of voting. Purpose to remove participation barriers for voting. That's the whole purpose of making a 4-day holiday out of voting. Who this was what? The National Coalition of Black Civic Participation develops a policy for organizing community participation in networks. Black Voters Matter conducts voter engagement operations. Faith-based coalitions step in and they provide, to help develop policy on how to coordinate local mobilization sites. So if we develop policy up front that addresses how to do it everywhere, we could get all these eaches out the way, and these, voting core agents start developing policy on staff polling support teams, and then state election offices help us develop policy on how to extend polling operations and all that kind of stuff. At the end of this, we have policy and we've put in place to go through the process to establish a national 4-day voting period with logistical access and support. All right. The 4-day weekend is really interesting because in that, one of my initiatives is that every school bus in the country on that 4-day weekend we pay them. We have a fund for that. We still pay them, but instead of picking up children on that 4-day weekend, they go pick up people and take them to voting centers. That's their job for the weekend, and we pay them overtime for that. They go to, instead of getting picked kids at the bus stops, or we can during voting period designate key points, but the goal is everybody in any neighborhood can go vote now. We can go, and they have no excuse because there's a bus there to pick them up and bring them home. All right. Step 7, participation analytics and trust restoration. Purpose, long-term democratic stability in voting. And when I say Democrat, I'm not talking about the Democratic Party idiots. Who does what? HBCUs build policy to analyze turnout gaps. Urban League helps build policy that focuses on builds engagement improvement programs. Voting Corps headquarters helps build policy that publishes transparency dashboards. And then the NAACP helps build policy that helps build on monitoring disenfranchisement trends and stuff like that. At the end of this, we have public trust dashboards and participation improvement plans to include the policy that goes with them. All right. And step 8, and this is the last step. I think this is the last step in the voting court. Let me check. I apologize. Oh, we got 10 steps. I apologize. Step 8, incentive adoption framework. Encourage adoption with federal takeover. What does Urban League helps build policy that develops state incentive models for get into the voting core. Howard Law drafts a doctrine and talks about granting compliance rules. Voting core headquarters help the policy on administering and scoring and certification. States, they help develop the doctrine on adopt standards and voluntary for benefits. The output of a cooperative adoption system instead of mandates. Step 9, protected funding structure, similar to my police funding. Remove political manipulation. And the purpose of this is to remove political manipulation risk. The NAACP plus Howard Law helps develop doctrine on the design, protected funding, legal structure. Congress partners help enact statutory protection for the voting corps, and then the voting corps headquarters helps in that effort to develop policy that manages dedicated trust fund. The output would be a stable, nonpartisan funding mechanism for the voting corps that has nothing to do with whoever's in charge. Step 10, public transparency system. Purpose of this is to get institutional legitimacy for the voting corps. The voting corps headquarters publishes a real-time audit dashboards. HBCUs, they develop policy on maintaining data integrity. Community coalitions at this time that this system is in place host public forums on it. Citizen review boards, they observe and verify operations of what did it work, did it not work, and the output would be a visible national election accountability system. And in the end state for this one would be within one generation, similar to the police program. Americans no longer debate whether elections are legitimate. They know voting becomes predictable, it becomes trusted, it becomes secure, it becomes routine. Democracy stops functioning as periodic crisis and begins operating as a maintained infrastructure. The vote is no longer defended emotionally, it is defended structurally. And when a nation permanently protects its vote, it permanently stabilizes its future, guys. And that's it for the voting corps, all 10 steps. Now, step 3, moving along, immigration reform. This is what originally got me started on my solution series, was immigration. Being born in Arizona, I've always, immigration's always, you always hear about it on the news, but you never really take it serious until you get older and you start understanding what's going on. America keeps arguing about the border because we keep treating migration as a border event, like it happens at the border. It is not, if you pay attention, if you understand immigration, you understand it's not a border event. It's really a collapse of origin event, meaning that the countries where they come from, there's a collapse of infrastructure, stability, everything. People do not cross deserts, rivers, and cartels because they want to enter America. They cross because where they came from stopped functioning. So we respond with detention, release cycles, asylum backlog, political argument. None of those repair the origin. And because the origin remains broken, the flow never stops. This produces predictable consequences. Overwhelmed borders, agencies, exploited migrant labor markets, humanitarian deaths in transit, tensions between working class communities inside the U.S. We are managing pressure instead of stabilizing the system, creating the pressure. If the conditions people flee never change, migration never ends. My immigration solution solves that problem, people. It solves the problem. It requires a lot of coordination. But a complex problem like immigration is not going to be easy to solve to begin with, but it solves the problem. We create safe zones in those countries. Initially, I say they're NATO safe zones, but NATO has a tendency not to play too much in the South American market. But we create safe zones. We vet current immigration forces. We create a NATO force, not assigned to any country, a NATO force. They're NATO soldiers for defensive purposes. We train them to be defensive soldiers in these safe zones in their countries. If you attack the safe zone, you attack NATO. Instead of leaving their country and running to America, they can run to the safe zone. But in my plan, I introduce indoor farming, recycling for the purpose of creating housing and industry for themselves. I don't just make a space for them. I provide them the tools that they need to go back to their country and be successful, like we would do for anybody that we wanted to help. So if you're serious about immigration, if anybody's serious about immigration, listen to this. Read the damn plan and pass it on and get it started. It's not hard. It's hard because you don't know. It's time to know. Read the paper. The purpose of my immigration plan is to create a binational stabilization and a training corridor that converts, irregular migration into an organized human development, not deportation, not open entry, stabilization. America benefits through reduced border encounters, controlled legal migration pathways, workforce readiness before entry, regional stability instead of regional collapse, lower long-term enforcement costs. The goal is not to move people into America. The goal is to restore places people don't feel forced to leave. The organization involved to cover diplomacy, policy design, and international coordination, I believe, should be involved are the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, the BAJI, they cover migrant protection frameworks and advocacy alignment. Howard University and International Affairs, they cover treaty and bilateral policy architecture. Morehouse and Spelman public policy programs, they cover economic and reintegration modeling for this. And then the Mexican government partners, they cover land allocation in Mexico that I talk about in my plan, joint coordination, operational legality. And then the international NATO partners, both in the US and Canada and Mexico, and NATO, if unavailable, on discussion of these safe zones and what they could possibly look like. Recommendations on how to make it real, the steps. Step 1, Mexico bilateral operating agreement, Camp Hope authorization. If you read my paper, I called the place that starts this Camp Hope. The purpose, create a lawful processing and training zone south of the U.S. border. Organizations involved, Howard University of International Affairs. They draft the U.S.-Mexico Memorandum of Cooperation. It defines jurisdictional rules and operational authority. It establishes humanitarian processing legality. Morehouse and Spelman public policy programs. They build policy justification and economic impact models. Prepare legislative briefing materials for both governments. Design oversight and governance structure. The Black Alliance for Justice Immigration. They establish migrant right protections. They define voluntary participation standards. They align advocacy partners to support the agreement. Mexican government partners. Designate land for Camp Hope. Approve operational security authority. Recognize facility as a legal humanitarian processing zone. Output, legal authority to process migrants outside of the U.S. territory. Purpose, replace irregular crossing. Step 2, Camp Hope construction and intake system. The purpose, replace irregular crossings with organized intake stabilization. HBCUs, they'll design the modular intake and housing facilities. I have the design. They will build water, sanitation, and power layouts. Historically Black colleges public health programs. They'll create medical screening and stabilization programs. They'll help establish disease and control procedures. The Black Alliance for Just Immigration. They'll help to conduct legal orientation and intake rights briefing doctrine. And they'll create doctrine to monitor humane processing conditions. Morehouse and Spelman policy programs. They'll develop classification and intake categories, doctrine, and they'll doctrine to establish administration processes workflow. And then Camp Hope functions, they'll help establish the register center. They'll help establish the medical stabilization site. They'll help doctrine for the skills assessment center, and then for the training campus. Output for this whole step would be an organized migrant intake replacing illegal crossings. Step 3, skills training and workforce pipeline. So this goes with what I was just talking about introducing recycling, indoor farming to create recycling, one, to get rid of, to recycle materials, but one, to use recycled materials to build houses with. So I would need the HBCU engineering and architectural programs to help create the train and modular housing construction crews, the training for that. Develop training on how to teach infrastructure maintenance skills. Because once we send these people back to these safe zones, they can use these recycling pieces to create the modular houses for their own communities. The HBCU technical programs help train and develop the training for sanitation and logistics technicians, and then develop a program to certify operations workers. The next National Black Farmers Association, I bring them in. They help define agricultural certification tiers for this indoor farming that I'm looking at. They establish workforce readiness classifications for these indoor farmers. BAJI helps monitor voluntary participation. And the protections. The training areas created, we have indoor farming, housing construction, water systems, sanitation logistics, community maintenance. These are all new job titles for immigrants going back to their country. We can create PDFs because this same technology that I'm using for this is the same technology I'm trying to bring to America. What you create here is a certified workforce before relocation and entry eligibility. All right. We're not just sending people back to their country. We're sending them back with a skill to help build their little safe zone to the best of their abilities. Step 4, safe zone deployment in origin countries. Stabilize. So the purpose of this is to stabilize community people who are fleeing from their own countries. Howard International Affairs Program. They help create the doctrine that coordinate international safe zone agreements. They help create the doctrine to establish governance frameworks. HBCU engineering programs. They help create the deploys and how to deploy the housing infrastructure doctrine because we're going to teach them how to build it over in one location. Now we got to teach them how to deploy this housing infrastructure and the doctrine for that. And also build water and sanitation systems. Tuskegee and FAMU agriculture, install food production systems. Baji, monitoring humanitarian protections, coordinating NGO cooperations. International defensive security partners help us provide civilian protections only and help us secure infrastructure sites. The output, functional communities replacing collapsing conditions that's all around them. That's what these internationally safe zones will be. Functional communities replacing collapsed conditions. Step 5, part of my immigration plan is a voluntary return with dignity pathway. And the purpose is to replace deportation with a structured choice. The Baji creates a doctrine that talks about they will conduct return counseling and a policy that talks about guarantee and voluntary participation. Morehouse and Spelman policy programs develop a policy that tracks reintegration success, policy that administer placement agreements, and then safe zone administrations assign housing and employment doctrine for those people that who have to be deported and they want to go back to this is another option that we have. Once we establish these safe zones, we can help deport people who already have who have developed skills in the United States, who've been here for a while. If that's the option that we want to do, I have a plan for that too later down the road. But if we want to send them back, we send them back to these safe zones and we give them an option, to help take their skill instead of pushing them out into a country and bringing them down. We can actually put them in an area we'll help build them up. Participate options, they can return to a safe zone with employment, or they can apply for a structured legal entry. Output, migration becomes managed circulation, meaning that we find a place for these people because we have places for them to go. That makes sense. We're not just sending somebody to a prison camp. What damn sense does that make? Legal entry based on contribution. Step 6, purpose to align migration with preparedness and workforce demand. Howard law and policy programs to draft eligibility frameworks, proposals, help align training certifications to legal categories. Industry workforce channels through policy agreements help identify labor needs, help accept the qualified participants. Baji monitors fairness and rights compliance and output, a legal entry tied to readiness instead of desperation. Meaning we send people where they need to go based on the requirements that the people are giving us in their workforce. Think about that. People coming across the border, going straight into jobs that Americans don't want to work for. Interesting. That's a whole nother conversation. Step 7, expansion to global stabilization model. Turn migration response into an international prevention system. Howard International Affairs, negotiate replacement agreements with other nations. Because these safe zones that I'm thinking about, guys, if we really sit back and think about this, we establish a safe zone and, people are fleeing El Salvador, they're seeing wherever they're Haiti, wherever they're fleeing from, we establish safe zones. Then we take this NATO force and we protect it. And then we put the backing of NATO behind it if anybody attacks it in whatever way we feel is an attack, whether it be with drugs, whether it be with anything, that's considered an attack on a safe zone. And you got the full backing of NATO to go and attack that whatever has threatened a safe zone and demolish them completely. All right. Think about this. We could use this all over the world. So imagine I put a safe zone in Palestine right now. safe zone in Syria, safe zone in Africa. End state of all this when migration stops being a permanent crisis. Instead, people are trained before movement, communities stabilize before departure, entry follows separation. The border no longer absorbs collapse. It becomes the final step of an organized process. Migration shifts from emergency management to system management. Structural solution, not political argument. All right. Step 4, indoor farming network, community food, stability infrastructure. The problem, deserts persist in the wealthiest agricultural nation on earth. Entire neighborhoods rely on imported food supply chains that stretch hundreds or thousands of miles. If transport slows, shelves thin. If logistics fail, shelves empty. And the most vulnerable communities feel it first. If the lights went out tonight, who feeds the poor? Ask yourself that question. If the lights stayed off for 2 weeks, 2 months, who's going to feed the people? Not grocery stores, not supply trucks, not emergency relief system designed for days, not months, and not for the whole damn population. We have built communities that consume food but cannot produce survival. What kind of damn sense does that make? Food security is not a poverty issue. It's a resilience failure. And every housing redevelopment effort that does not include localized food production simply rebuilds dependence. Think about that. I was driving around today and I looked at all these apartment complexes as far as you can see. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking about that. Every one of those is a death trap if the lights went out. You got mass numbers of people in one location and no ability to feed themselves. What happens in 2 months in an apartment complex and the lights go out? The purpose of the food program is to create a standardized, repeatable indoor agricultural facilities that deploy alongside modular housing, forming a permanent neighborhood food production layer. Not gardens, not pilot programs, infrastructure. Americans benefit through localized food resilience, reduced emergency relief burden, stable nutrition in vulnerable communities, workforce training in food production technology, disaster-resistant food access. Food becomes a built system, not a supply assumption. And guess what? If you're on welfare, this is one of your options to work in at least 30 hours a week. And we'll train you in it because the days of working on welfare and not doing nothing, that's over. We need to figure out a way to take care of each other. And everybody needs to contribute in whatever capacity they can. And the way I see it, if I put these recycling facilities in a community and give them the training that they need to grow their own food and make them, give them a PDF, an advanced, technology. If you read the program, I got the job descriptions listed. We're on our way to a better America already. Because in this system, food becomes a built system, not a supply assumption. All right. Organizations involved. I got agricultural research and production, Tuskegee University Agriculture, Florida A&M, Black Urbans. I'm gonna speed through these guys because the food, the recycling, and the housing structure, they all go together. They're one and the same in my mind because I can't do one without the other. When I build the templates for the housing, I'm gonna build the templates for the indoor farming. And I'm also going to I want to build a template for the recycling facility out of the same materials. All right. The low income housing, as I talked to you in the first one, that's about templating. America does not actually lack anti-poverty spending. It lacks anti-poverty structure. Current programs keep people alive, but really reposition them into stability. Housing assistance is temporary. Food assistance is fragmented. Training is disconnected from real jobs. Work schedules destabilize households. So the cycle repeats. Unstable housing, unstable nutrition, unstable employment, unstable education outcomes, generational dependency. And beneath it all sits a deeper vulnerability. If supply chains stop tomorrow, power outage, disaster, economic shock, who feeds the poorest communities? So when I say I want to create housing, infrastructure, recycling, and indoor farming, I say that because the structure itself that we currently follow is not working for us anymore. And this makes too much sense. We have this, like I was explaining earlier. There some people like all the, we need the big house, the 2,000 square foot house and all this kind of stuff. Everybody doesn't want that. We have the ability now to create housing that looks better than some of these 3,000 square foot houses, through plastic. Like I said, the plan I laid out goes step by step on how each one of these goes. And like I said, the housing, the recycling, and the indoor farming go together. Because when I create the templates for the housing, I create the templates for the farming, I create the templates for the recycling facility. All right. In my mind, it's the same equipment, creating the same, creating different shapes, to put on buildings and stuff like that. If I'm oversimplifying this, guys, let me know. But I don't think I am. Like I said, the technology is there. So I'm gonna roll through 4, 5, and 6, which talks about the housing, the recycling facility, and the indoor farming, just for time purposes. All right. Because I want to get to my 7 and 8, which are my last two, which is the Veteran Civic Renewal Compact, I call the VCRC, which is a national stability framework, not a veterans benefit program. And I want to talk about this because this is important too. Not everything's important, but this is something I think that can help have a big impact on America too. It doesn't begin with federal funding, grants, or social services. It begins with entrusted ground. Across the United States, since an enormous amount of underutilized property, inherited land no one lives on, farmland no one works, closed installations, vacant industrial property, unused municipal facilities, redevelopment areas that never redevelop. At the same time, the nation maintains a large population of highly trained individuals, disciplined, mission-oriented, team-structured, who leave service and are expected to reintegrate into society individually without structure. This VCRC connects those two idle national assets, unused land and unused organized capability. Landowners, families, municipalities, and agencies voluntarily designate property as veteran stewardship property. These properties are not sold. They are not investment vehicles. They are not speculative housing developments. They entered a protective national stewardship system administered by a Veteran Civic Stewardship Association that we need to create, a national veteran managed civic authority functioning similar to a standards enforcing HOA, but with public purpose instead of private profit. Veterans do not purchase these communities. They are entrusted with responsibility for them. The association maintains operational standards, coordinates development partners, and ensures the sites remain permanently aligned with civic purpose. Once land exists, systems activate. All the things I've been talking about, the low income transportation housing, the templated housing, the recycling facilities, the indoor farming facilities, the workforce training pipelines, all that is involved in this veteran community that I'm talking about. This compact is not a housing initiative. It is a conversion mechanism. Gratitude equals responsibility equals stability. America currently treats veterans as individuals transitioning into society. But the military didn't train individuals. It trained teams operating in systems. When the structure disappears overnight, society loses access to leadership discipline, conflict de-escalation skills, logistics coordination ability, maintenance culture, accountability structures, chain of responsibility behavior. The VCRC restores that structure, not for the benefit of veterans alone, but for the environments around them also. A veteran community placed near struggling neighborhoods does something programs cannot. It normalizes stability through daily exposure, not lectures, not campaigns, visible routine. People leaving at the same time, same hour daily, maintenance happening without crisis, rules enforced calmly, problems handled early. Because many communities today don't lack consistent models of structured adulthood. I'm sorry to say that. Particularly environments where young people regularly observe coordinated responsibility in action. Research across social science fields consistently shows that stable adult presence and visible work structure correlates with improved youth outcomes, reduced violence, exposure, and improved long-term economic behavior. The VCRC operationalizes that principle intentionally, not policing communities, but supervising communities, stabilizing the environment next to them. Children grow up seeing order instead of hearing about it. Can you imagine, me putting a VCRC in New York, getting some old project in New York that's been abandoned and putting a bunch of veterans in there. VCRC maintains it. They got a dining facility at their little community. Get up, you see Pete. For those veterans that like to do it, we get up every morning. We do PT in the morning. Here we go. We can start doing that again at old people. On the way, on the move, gotta groove. Hear that every morning. That's inspiring. I don't care who you are. It could be really inspiring for a bunch of kids who ain't never heard nothing like that in their life, other than gunshots and other stuff, or tires tearing down the street, race car and shit. Yeah, and shooting guns and stuff. They can see something better. You know, transform, donated, and repurposed land into veteran-led civic-led stability communities that serve as anchors of order, training, and continuity for surrounding regions. America benefits through removal of veteran homelessness pipelines. Because in my vision of this VCRC, I would have contract with Uber and all those agencies. Hey, if you find a homeless veteran, put them in your vehicle and drop them off at the nearest VCRC location, and we'll take care of them. Homeless veterans and just went away. You know, structured reintegration environments instead of isolation, productive reuse of vital land, train leadership presence embedded locally, youth mentorship through proximity rather than programming, activation platforms from national rebuilding initiatives. This is not assistance. This is national infrastructure built for human capital the country already invested in. Service to country becomes service to community, not temporarily, but structurally. These are not bases, they're not shelters, not developments. They're civic anchor zones, places where stability is practiced daily, responsibility is visible, order exists without enforcement, training never stops, and surrounding communities interact with functioning structure instead of asking how to help communities survive instability. The nation places stability beside them. You know, I think the VCRC is a huge program that if we can get it enacted, it becomes the program that we need to help bring that morality and that integrity that I said was missing earlier back into our systems. And then the last initiative I have is the situational oriented critical thinking, SOC-T. And I'm just cutting through these last two because of time, guys. I'm cutting into my hour. But like I said, you can read these. And SOC-T, situational oriented, is look at your school system, guys. If you're paying for your school, you're probably getting a good education. If you're not paying for your school, oh my God, oh my goodness. Schools currently organize learning around subjects and compliance instead of decision making. Students graduate knowing information but lacking operational skills, communication, teamwork, judgment, and leadership. The result is disengagement, behavioral instability, and workforce unpreparedness, especially in low structure environments. SOC-T replaces passive classroom with structured team-based problem environments where students practice thinking daily. The purpose of this is to create a repeatable national training structure inside the K through 12 education that builds thinking, communication, and responsibility the same way professional fields train competence. Education becomes preparation for participation in society, not preparation for tests. For leadership and policy, I use the National Alliance of Black School Educators. I use the National Black Council of School Board Members, the NABSC and the NBC-SBM. I use the Teacher Pipeline and Curriculum, the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, the HBCUs, the Black Principals Administration. This is a team effort. This is the whole village. If you haven't noticed, I'm using the whole village concept in all these solutions. For behavior and mentorship, the Association of Black Psychologists, 100 Black Men of America for mentoring organizations, the HBCUs for research and assessment, and departments, and the HBCUs for the computer science programs. You know, Step 1, create a SOC-T doctrinal board, define exactly how classrooms will operate nationally. The lead for this is the NABSE. They select 12-member doctrinal board, define classroom command structure, team roles, daily briefing format, and then publish required classroom behavioral standards. The NBC SBM align doctrine with district policy standard requirements, ensure adoption language works for school boards. And HBCUs translate doctrines to teacher actions, lessons, delivery behaviors. Output, SOC-T classrooms, doctrine manual, teacher rule book. I got a paper on SOC-T too. It was based off my time at West Point teaching there and how we was teaching an outcomes-based doctrine. I tell you what, it's the quickest way and probably the best way to get kids to learn because it's all on them. Teachers, they spend time up front building the curriculum, building the questions, and then the students spend their time getting the answers. But the whole key to it, the whole key to the whole program is the brief back. Every student's required to brief back what they learned. And you put them in groups. So there's a way of pitting the groups with each other, group dynamics and stuff that really push children to expand their knowledge faster. Those kids were already, self-starters, so it wasn't much of a challenge for them. But I think in this group, the small groups in low, it could be, given the right way, it could really, really change the dynamics of particularly low-income schools where the lack of tools and stuff to teach kids is not there. Because once you start building these SOC-T lessons, critical exercises, they can be, the only difference in the exercises is the level of complexity that you put in each one of them, and it's boundless. So something to think about moving forward for these kids. I'm not, like I said, for time purposes, and I apologize up front for not going through each one of these steps. I know some of you are like, well, good, I'm glad he got through, because I want to get to the end of this without going over an hour. I'm trying not to go over an hour. Where am I at right now? I'm a little bit over an hour, but I'm almost done. So the next steps for this, guys, all right, I put a structure on the table, not a slogan, not frustration, a plan, step by step, responsibility by responsibility. So the question now is no longer what's wrong with the country. The question is who's willing to help fix it? Because we cannot keep waiting for permission to improve the place we live in. You don't wait for permission to repair your home. And this is our home. Anything done out of anger destroys it. Anything done with discipline strengthens it. This is not rebellion. Like I said, this is ownership. For years, we have had talent, we have had education, credentials, influence, some influence, but too much of it has been used only to survive individually. And intelligence was never meant to end at employment. Education is not just a path to a paycheck. It is also the ability to shape conditions. Now, let me be honest about something. I've done what I can. I've done what I've done. I can do alone, I guess is what I'm saying. Like Popeye said, I've done what I mapped the problems, identified the institutions, assigned roles. I built a framework that shows how these capabilities could align without tearing anything down, only build better. But bringing this, like I said earlier, I'm lighting the runway, and bringing this aircraft fully into the air will require people and institutions far greater than me. Leaders with integrity, organizations with integrity, willing to align their strengths, individuals inside whose organizations who recognize that moments like this require stepping forward, not for attention, but for responsibility, because right now, one of the biggest problems in our environment is lack of integrity. I keep telling you that. Too much noise, too much performance, too many people lying about the lies they already told. How Run DMC used to say, you lied about the lies that you lied about. That's commonplace right now. That doesn't build a stable society. Only integrity does. And that kind of leadership, this moment requires leadership that is not afraid to be seen doing the right thing. I said that before. We need the type of leadership right now that can stand in the light and say, I'm doing this because it makes the country better. Not hiding, no performance, just responsibility. So here are the next steps. If we really want to do this first, if you're part of one of these organizations mentioned in these initiatives, read the plan. The full framework is available. Go to my podcast page and it gives a link from there to my plans. Understand what the role of your institution could play. You know your lane better than I do. If the role assigned makes sense, step forward. If it needs improvement, improve it. Second, each organization should identify at least one point of contact, one professional willing to represent the institution, and working sessions around these initiatives, not panels, not speeches, working sessions. Third, we begin with the one pilot location, not nationally, not theoretically, locally and visibly, because proof ends argument. Once people see something working, momentum builds. Fourth, those with resources, influence, or platforms, help and bring the right people into the room. This effort will require convening, alignment, coordination, and leadership strong enough to focus on the mission instead of personal credit. I'm standing by ready to help coordinate that alignment, to connect pieces. The plans are written, the structure exists, the runway lights are on. Now we find out something important, whether we are only capable of analysis or if we are capable of construction. If we cannot move forward with this here, I will continue pushing it wherever people are willing to build, because improvement should never stop at borders. But my hope is that it begins here, right here, with people willing to lead with integrity, because the truth is simple. When integrity leads, progress usually follows. So the door is open. The plan is on the table. Now we find out who's ready to build. And quick recap. Let's step back just a moment. This conversation is not about separation. And once again, I want everybody to know that. When Dr. King and that generation fought, the fight was about access, because Black Americans had almost none. Access to education, access to opportunity, access to participation in systems that shaped the country. That fight changed America. Today, we live in a different reality. We are present in every sector of this country: education, business, government, engineering, medicine, culture. We are integrated into the structure. So the question in front of us now is different. It's no longer how do we gain entry, it's what do we do with access we have now. Because the truth is this: the solutions discussed here would not benefit only the Black communities. Dignified housing helps struggling white families in rural America. Food infrastructure strengthens Latino neighborhoods and small towns alike. Stable systems help every community that depends on them. This is not Black isolation. It's Black-led structural contribution. That's a sign of maturity. Now think about something else. Dr. King changed the trajectory of this country with fewer tools than we have today. No internet, no global communications network, no data systems, no ability to connect to institutions instantly across the country. Sometimes I ask myself a simple question. What could that generation have accomplished if they had the tools we have now? Because the tools are everywhere. The knowledge exists, the institutions exist, technology exists. What we lack is alignment. So the question in front of us isn't whether Black Americans have achieved. We have. The question is whether we have organized our collective capability in a way to help stabilize and strengthen the country itself. That's a different level of power. If Black power means pride, we already have that. If it means representation, we have that. If it means cultural influence, we have that all over the world. But if Black power means the disciplined ability to coordinate institutions and talent towards solving national problems, then that chapter hasn't even begun yet. So the real question is not whether the dream succeeded. The question is whether we are ready to build on that dream. Because dreams open doors. Structure determines what to come next. And when someone stands up and lays out a framework without institutional backing, without political protection, just a plan, do we examine it? Do we improve it? Do we build on it? Or do we ignore it because it didn't arrive through the channels we're used to, the ones that are not working? That's the moments where the ones that are not working right now, because this country is almost burning. That's the moment we're in. Not the end of a movement, a possible evolution of it. So the question isn't whether we've accomplished something. The question is whether we are all ready to align what we already have and take the next step forward. That's where I stand, and that's the conversation. Thank you.
Now that you know the plan, it's time to stand. Join the evolution for the solution. Join the evolution for the solution. integrity through the land by giving a helping hand. Pass the word and embrace the vision. A new America, a new mission. Johnny Evolution, Johnny Evolution, Johnny Evolution, Johnny Evolution, Johnny Evolution, Johnny Evolution, keep the light, keep the fire. America, we inspire. We got to fight, fight, fight for our rights day and night. Johnny Evolution, for the solution. Johnny Evolution, for the solution. Johnny Evolution, Johnny Evolution, Johnny Evolution. A vision.